I'm here today. Tom usually says this, but today here with Tom Malash, A2 Agile, talking as usual about intentional culture and telling some stories,
You call A2 Agile and you ask for Tom, you have a pretty good chance of getting somebody.
getting one of us. You'll need to be more specific if you don't want to be ambiguous. Um,
You and I are focused on intentional culture. And you had a particular topic you wanted to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I was sharing with you an experience I had the other day that I thought might be interesting to share. We have a notion that intentional culture is this thing that you could do top to bottom and really create a whole organization around it. But throughout my career, I've had experiences in little microcosm of intentional culture. And I used to be the CIO of an engineering services firm in Southfield, Michigan. And during that time, I came in and inherited an organization that was part of a larger organization that didn't have a good, strong culture around teamwork. And I mean, I don't like the word meritocracy, but I think there was a little bit too much politics there when I started. And I had four direct reports. The organization wasn't that big. It was, maybe 25 people. I ended
So
up
that's a
cutting,
nice size.
yeah, yeah, and I ended up cutting it down to two direct reports. And the only reason that I did that was for political reasons, because there were, I couldn't
You gave them to somebody else.
I couldn't I couldn't really demote everybody and say, we're going to have this flat organization, so we don't need all these people that are just in charge of other people. What I did do was I cultivated a relationship with everybody on the team around a sense of respect for each other and a sense of value and worth for each other. What happened from there was that we had this group of people who really felt like whatever was on their mind, whatever they had to contribute, would be heard openly and honestly. And one of the software developers came to me, which keep in mind at that point, I was technically two levels up from him. But he came to me and he said, I've been doing this research for school about process mapping, and it's really cool stuff. And I'm like, well, Rob, I at that time didn't really know anything about process mapping. And I said, Rob, why don't you put together a little presentation for the whole team? Let's all learn about it. And he did that. And he shared this process mapping with the whole IT team. And we were all super impressed with the potential to visualize the way we work in a way that really procedural documents generally didn't do up to that point. They procedural documents, and when you look at a procedural document, you see a page of text.
Yeah, the wall of text.
And there's no flow to it. It may be numbered one, two, three, or maybe it isn't. Doesn't matter. There's just no real sense of flow to it. And as you and I know from studying and practicing Agile for so many years, flow flow is really everything. Like if you can't see the flow, you can't really see what's going on. So so we really didn't have a great application for it until a few weeks later. It wasn't long. The executive committee was talking about getting ISO 9001 certified. At that time, it was unusual for an engineering services firm to get ISO 9000 certified. It was mostly manufacturers and people that were building things or shipping things or, moving products around. And so for a services firm to do it was a little unusual, but because we were in the manufacturing business, we thought it would be really nice to lend credibility to the work we do if we could fly an ISO flag out front.
I love the idea. Yeah, it's wonderful.
And we, um, I introduced to the executive committee the idea of using process maps. And they got very excited about it too. In fact, one of our guys, my boss, who was the executive vice president, went off and to a seminar with Michael Hammer, who was one of the progenitors of process mapping, process engineering. Um, so we really
He
dug.
he got to go and meet the luminary. You didn't.
Yeah, yeah, right. I get. You think, if you're C-level executive that, that like you get to do all the fun stuff, but there's always somebody higher than you. I was given the assignment to run the ISO certification project. We hired an auditor, and I asked the auditor, might we be able to use process maps for our documentation? And they said, yeah, I guess so. There's as long as you say what you do and do what you say and it's detailed
Just
enough.
for no one who knows what ISO certification is, what Tom just said is sort of the key idea. It's like you have a process, you know what it is, you've documented it, and you can demonstrate that you're following it is a key idea behind this certification, which sounds really simple, but it's amazing how few people can actually do that.
Yeah. And far too many people are like paper tigers. They get their certification and and then they go back to kind of doing business as usual until 3 weeks before their next audit, and then they
Audit.
scramble to get some documentation together so that they could show that
That's,
they're doing it the way they said.
yeah, well, someone sits down and says, "This is the way we should do it." That's the dangerous word, right? Not the way we actually do it. And then they document it that way. And because you documented it that way, that's the trail that the auditor wants. By the way, like don't document something you're not going to do. Really, really seek to create like, well, this is probably where you're heading in all of this. But
Yeah,
first of all, it's genius, just genius to say, let's do the business process maps and make that request that those I don't need to write out walls of text. If I show you the map, which is a workflow, that is what we're going to do. That has the key states on it. Uh, so you did that. Like, then did you pass? Did you get certified?
well, here's the interesting thing. Let me just add a little color to what you just said. We made the decision that we would literally just document how we do things now. Like we weren't going to invent processes for
Nice.
ISO. We did. There are some ISO processes that unless you're ISO certified, you kind of don't need. Like we needed a process for certifying changes to our process.
Right.
To we needed a change process for our
Yeah. Yeah.
process. And that was something we didn't have. And we consciously said, look, when we looked at, you can always look at templates and ideas that other people have done for ISO. And a lot of companies actually just buy a template and go, here, boom, splat. This is how we're going to do
Yeah.
it. This is how the
They're gonna
pros tell
struggle.
us. And we looked at those and they're like, oh my God, these change processes are just a mired mess of steps that we just don't want to go through. Now, this is long before the word agile was
Agile.
entered into the business lexicon, but we were like, what gets us as close to how we would do it now.
Yeah.
And so
I mean,
we
you have I can already tell you one key difference is what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to document the change back into your diagrams.
right, right. And we're going to have some approval process, but we made it
Someone's going to have to
extremely
actually prove, yeah, how light can we make that process?
right, right. Like, what would we probably do anyway? Like you generally when you make a change, you want to get some approval for it, just slap it out
Yeah.
there. So we
Normally
just
we'd ask Bob. So now we have to say, well, we need to create a specific ceremony where we show it to Bob and Bob approves. Like, all right, we can
so
do that.
we did the process maps. We presented it for our audit. We passed the audit. We got our flag. Life was good. And this was when we did this. This was ISO 1997 ISO when we got certified. 4 years later, now we weren't, this wasn't done, this was done in probably 98. So 97 stuck around for 4 or 5 years before they changed the ISO standard again. The next time they changed it was in 2001. And when they changed it in 2001, I believe I've got my dates right here, they required process maps.
You like to at least believe you had a positive influence on the whole
Well,
certification
I
process.
sure didn't discourage it. I don't know if I had if anybody even knew what we'd done when they made that decision, but clearly process mapping during that period in the development of business management technique had grown in popularity to the point where process management was the agile of the time.